Welcome to the solution video for the WinForm to-do list challenge. Let's jump right into Visual Studio and we'll create a new project. And for this project, we want to choose that we want it to be on Windows, and the project type will be desktop. And that gives us a few options here, and we should also choose C# just so we're clear. And then in here in this list, we gotta find WinForms. Windows Form App.NET Core, not what we're going to do today. We're going to do Windows Form App.NET Framework. The reason why is because .NET Core does not yet have a designer as of the recording of this video, and so that would just make it extra hard to do. So let's just do .NET Framework. The reality is this application works almost identically in .NET Core, so you're not losing anything by doing it in .NET Framework. Let's call this the WinForm UI and the WinForm to-do challenge app. And let's change. Okay, so there's our list. If we want to add something new, we're going to need to have an input box. So let's grab one of those. So a text box. And we're going to need to rename that. So new to do text. Call it new to do text is fine. And then I'll just copy and paste this. It doesn't really matter if I copy and paste it or if I create a new label. I'll call this new to do label. And we're going to change this to say new to do item. So we'll grab this. We're not making this terribly neat and clean and pretty and the best flow. We're just trying to get some stuff on the form. If you want to make it neater and prettier, that'd be awesome. Go for it. So I'll do a couple things, but nothing serious here. So this is going to be add new to do. Notice I'm not capitalizing D and do for this, being consistent throughout. All right, so add new to do, and whoops, that's not the name. So this is add to do item. That's what the button's going to show, and then the name will be add new to do. So it's going to add to the list. We also want a couple more things here that will probably end up being more towards the middle here. So let's drag a new button on that says, let's call this the edit button. And it's just going to say edit. And we'll shrink that down a little bit and move it closer to here. And then we'll copy and paste it and have a delete. And so it's a delete button. I'm going to leave off the idea of having a complete button as well, since we're going to have that double click to complete. But we could add that here so that we have something visually, but the double click adds a quicker way of doing it. It's up to you if you want to do that or not. It would call the same code essentially. So again, it's up to you if you want to do both ways of doing it, or if you want to just have the one way of doing it. So based upon our primary challenge, we need to have a to-do list in a list box. Got that. Allow a user to add items. That's this right here. Remove items. That's delete. And edit items. That's there. And then of course, complete will be by double clicking. So these are all the visual elements to perform the challenge. Now we have to wire them up to do the work. So let's get started on that. So the first thing we'll need to do is let's create a model. I could create this in a class library, but I'm going to create it right in the user interface because we're just dealing with UI work today, so I think this is appropriate. So this is going to be the to-do item model. There we go. And we'll unpin this as well and make this public. And we need a few properties, or at least we need the two. So the first one is going to be the position number. And the second one is going to be the actual to do. Let's call it to do. I'm debating between calling it to do and to do text. And the reason why is because to do sounds an awful lot like a model or an item, an object, where really all we're caring about in this is that the text of it. So I think I'm gonna call it to do text, and then we'll have one more that is complete. So those are our three values, and I think that completes an item. So now let's go back to our to-do form and go to the code behind for this. And we're going to do a lot of stuff in the code behind, whether I can move some of it to a class library or at least an external class. It's possible, but a lot of this stuff is going to be directly UI code. So as a balance here, don't just put all your code in the code behind, because the code behind for a form should be just about user interface code. It should not be about business logic or data access code. It should just be about displaying things, taking things off the display, moving things around, those type of things. But in this application, that's mostly what it's going to be. And so I'm going to put my code just right behind the form. So I'm going to have a list of type, let's do not a list, let's do a binding list of type to-do item model and call this the to-do list, like so. And then let's initialize it. We're not pulling from a database. So if we're pulling from a database, the thing I do is in the constructor or somewhere near about the constructor as far as time-wise goes, I would call out to the database and get this to-do list. And so I wouldn't have to do this new binding. because it wouldn't be a fresh list that you get initially. It's the list from the database. And so I'd go out and call the database, get the information back, and then I'd say to-do list equals new binding list and pass in the constructor the list from a database, which would be a list of T or an IEnumerable of T. Because you can't just say a new list equals new binding list. That doesn't work quite right. You've got to initialize a new binding list with an existing list if you have a list. So all that to say, if this was coming from a database, I would do things a little bit differently. But since we are starting off from scratch and have no list, this is the way to go. Now let's at least break out our calls into independent methods instead of doing it right in events. That way, when we do move this to a class library, that we are ready to pull certain things out. So we're going to have a private void, and this one's going to be add to do, and it's going to pass in a to do text. So this is a very simple method. It's going to say to do list dot add to do text, and that's not going to work because to do text that's a string. To do text is looking for a to do item. Let's take a step back here and create a to do item model called to do equals new to do item model, and let's add in the things that we need to right away. So this will be to do. There we go. That's much better. But for our to do text, we have to do text. And for our is complete, we should change that so that by default, which is going to be, but by default, it's going to be false. So by default, if you don't specify, a Boolean is false. However, with that being said, I'm going to set it to be false explicitly so that visually you understand this is what we intend for this to have, so that down the road someone doesn't come down and say, oh, you know what? Let's set this to true by default and be more explicit. But that's wrong because that would cause some problems. So let's just be very, very clear here in our setting of our code. This does not change the performance at all of your code because by default it's false. Therefore, this is doing the exact same thing. Therefore, no extra code gets run. No extra sets happen. It just is. Actually, in fact, I think it takes it off because it's extraneous. It doesn't need it. And so there's no extra work being done here. Okay, back here. So we have the is complete already set. Now we have to figure out what is the order number for our item. Now there's a couple of schools of thought here. One is it's the one you just add, therefore it goes at the beginning or the top. I don't really like that. There's not a whole lot of justification for that. Another school of thought is it's the last one you entered, therefore it goes last on the list. That's more common, but the problem there is what if you have completed items? Well, the directions don't say anything about reordering completed items to the bottom. It just says that we should be able to move things up and down in the bonus challenge, but that's all it says. So it doesn't say that move things to the bottom if they're complete. So I don't think it's a problem to put this at the bottom, and I think that's probably the best choice. It's also the easiest on our system. So if we set the priority or position number equal to to-do list dot count, what that will do is, since it's a zero-based item, let's say there's 3 items in the list, it's going to say 3 is the count. But those items are at position 0, 1, and 2. Therefore, position number 3 will be this item. So that's one way of doing it. Now, another way of doing it is saying, actually, I want to add 1 to that list because I don't want it to be zero-based when the user sees it. Users don't really like zero-based lists unless you're a programmer. So they're going to want to see 1, 2, 3, not 0, 1, 2. In which case, what we can do is say +1. So it's always going to add 1 to the count. So if the count is empty, it's going to be 0, in which case it starts at 1. If the count has 3 items in it, it'll be 4 because the items in it are 1, 2, and 3. So I think we'll go that route since more users like the 1-based counting versus the 0-based. So I think that makes sense. Now this does mean that if we were to skip numbers in our list, we'd have a problem. So if we had 1, 2, 4 for our 3 items, then this would also be positioned as number 4, and that wouldn't make sense. So that's something to keep in mind, is we'll have to update our values to continuously have no gaps. And I think to do that, what we'll need to do is make sure we always have a reorder method. So private void reorder to-dos. And what this will do is we're going to have a for loop. And it's going to loop from 0 to to-do list dot count. So it's from 0 to just less than the count. What we'll do is for each item, so to-do list at that position, we're going to set the position number equal to, I put this in parens just in case, I plus 1. That's not going to add to I, that's just the result will be I plus 1. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 0, 1, 2. And it's going to set that in order for our position number, just to be sure we have the right numbers. That also makes our lives easier for these next methods. So we have a reorder to-dos now. Now we need to have a way of removing or editing an item. So let's start with remove. Private void remove item. And we're going to pass in here a to-do item model. To-do. And we're going to move this from the list. So that list is to-do list. So to-do list dot remove to-do. Seems simple, but let's say we have items 1, 2, and 3. We remove number 2. If we didn't change anything else, we now have 2 items in the list positioned at 1 and 3. That's a problem. So we're going to say reorder to-dos, and that will reorder them. Now let's have an edit. Private void edit item. And what this is going to do, well, there's actually 2 things it's going to do depending on, let's look at our design here, depending on which one you click. So I think what I'm going to do is if you click an item here and say edit, it's going to move the text over to here. And then this button here will save that to-do item. Kind of reuse our current controls. We'll have to change this label. We'll have to change what this button does. And so we have then 2 edits. This edit over here takes the item from here and populates this information over here. And it changes its label. It changes what this button does. And it remembers what item we're modifying. Then this button, the what's currently add to do item, when you click it, it's going to save the changes. So it's going to take the text from here, it's going to put it in the entry that model, and then that's it. It's going to kind of clear things out, maybe reset these back to new and add. So with all that being said, we need 2 buttons. One to start the edit and one to complete the edit. So let's call it start editing item. And the job here is to move that item over from our list and set up these things here. So how are we going to do that? Well, I think what we'll do is we'll create a to-do item model called current edit equals null to start, and we'll set this value to be whatever is selected. So we're going to have to pass something in to do item model to do, and we'll say that current edit equals to do, the item being passed in. That's going to start us off. Then we need to change the value of this text box, which is called new to do text. We probably should rename that to something else, but I'm going to keep it, I think. New to do text. I hate the idea of not doing it right. I really do. So let's call this to do text and to do label. So to do text, to do label, and let's call this add update to do. So now we have the idea that we're either doing an add or an update, and this is just the to do text and to do label. So that being said, we can set to do label dot text equal to, and the text right now is new to do item. We can set to edit to do item. And the button, so add update to do dot text equals, currently it's set to add to do item. We can say edit to do item. So we're going to edit to do item here, and we've changed the label as well. Let's change this from edit to update for the label. Otherwise, it's the same text over. All right. And now we need to set the value of the text field to do text, dot text equals current edit dot to do text. That's going to set the values of that text box equal to the text of our to do item. So that's the start. Now let's get the finish. So private void complete editing item. And what that will do is it's going to set the current edit dot to do text equal to do text dot text. So if we made any changes, we initially set it to the value of the current edit. Then once they have made the changes, we take the changes and put them back in a to do text, which is going to update that class item. We don't have to go any further because remember, class instances, we don't make copies of them. We pass around that address of where they're located. Therefore, just doing this right here has modified our list. And it has modified it in place without making any other changes. We haven't put it at the bottom now or anything else like that. Now what we need to do is set the values back to what they were. So let's set these three right here. The current edit is now going to be null. That's going to wipe out that address location. And this is going to be new and add. So new to do item and add to do item. That sets it back. And we also need a method for complete. So private void complete item. And we need to pass in that to do item. And here, really simple, to do dot is complete equals true. And we're done. So now we've completed an item as well. Now that we have all of these done, we can start creating or calling these using our events. So let's kind of minimize these down just to their definitions. And we didn't have to reorder for anything else, did we? No, just when we remove something. So adding works just fine. It's just removing that we have to reorder. Okay, just making sure that nothing else here was a reorder. Let's start with our add to do item. This is the trickiest one because it's add update. So if, and this up here is called current edit equals null, meaning we're not currently editing something, then we need to add to do, and we pass in the text, which is going to be the to do text dot text. And that's it. Besides, we need to clear that out. So to do text dot text equals empty string, or a string with no characters in it. So that's the start. That's if we are just adding something to the list. Notice how easy that was. Now we have the code written. And for else, we need to do the second half of the edit. So complete editing item. And then we need to set the to do text. Well, since we have to set it here as well, I think it makes sense to cut this out from here and put it at the bottom. So either way, that text gets cleared out. Now, complete editing item. Yes, we're not updating the text here. We're just saving the value. So, but either way, it's fine to wipe this out. I think it's a good practice. So now it should be that we can add an item to our list. Now let's go back here and, or add or edit. Now let's wire up the, let's wire the edit next. Well, the edit, what we need to do is we need to grab which item was selected. So that's our to-do list box. So if select or to-do list Now, if there's nothing selected, that edit button will do nothing. Now let's go back to our design and set the delete. The delete is going to look very, very similar. We're going to copy and paste this code, only it's going to be delete. Oops, it's not delete. What's the, we call it remove item. And you know what, we should probably call that delete item because it really does remove it from the list, which is deleting it. And I think it's clear to say delete. I'm going to do a control dot here to rename that. And now down here it says delete item. So we've done delete as here as well. And then from there we have the edit, two parts. We have the delete. The only thing we don't have is complete. Notice in my Visual Studio Editor, the complete item coloring is a little bit darker, if you can tell, than the other ones. And that's because it's not been called anywhere. You can also see over references, one reference, one reference, one reference, all the way down 0 references. If something has 0 references, it's not being called anywhere. Therefore, we're not done yet. We need to do that complete. So inside here, we need to look at our events, and we need to look at the double click occurs when the component is double clicked. So I'm going to double click in this box, and create my double-click event. And inside here, I'm going to do something very similar to what's happening here, in that I'm going to find the one that's selected, and then I am going to complete the item and pass the item to complete. Now, for this particular one, it should be noted that I don't know if I can get around having something selected. But just in case the list is empty and I double click on the list, I want to make sure that I'm still checking for that null. So can I get around it? Maybe. But if you're not quite sure, then don't get around it. Do the check. So let's just see if this all works. We've done a lot of code writing without a lot of testing yet. Typically I don't do that, but in these shorter videos I try to, just to be quick. So Tim, Corey, well, take out trash. That's more of a to-do item. It did something, but it's not showing up in the list. That's because there is no binding for this to-do list. Double click, nothing happens. Edit, nothing happens. Delete, nothing happens. So we're getting closer, but we need to actually wire up that list. So we need to have we need to set up our to-do list box dot items. Nope. Oh, that's what it is. Data source. Data source. If you don't use it for a while, you forget about it. So data source equals to-do list. And then we set up the to-do list box dot display member. And typically that takes in a string. So notice it's a string. So we need to have name of and then name of a property. So like to do, or let's not to do item model dot, and then one of our properties here, for example, to do text. That would work. The only problem is it does not show the position. So we're going to have to update that to be a different item. So let's go to our to do item model and create a constructor or a read-only variable. So public string, and this is to do, let's call it to do display. I'm going to do the lambda expression here. It makes it simpler. And from this, I can do our string interpolation and say position number first, and then a colon and a space, and then our to-do text, and then going to have after that whether or not it's complete. And how do I do that? I'm going to debate on that one. I'm going to say at the very end, I'll put in parens complete is, and then our Boolean. Is it pretty? No, not really. But it should work. So with that, I can go over here and change, instead of to do text, I can change that to do display, and that's going to give me my display text. Now this right here, this is a read-only property, and we're filling it in using the lambda expression. So it makes it a little simpler than creating a full property and taking out the set and adding in a full get and doing a return and then just returning this. And that cuts down all that work to just that. Okay, let's start this up again and see if we get a better result. So take out trash, and that works, but our box is a little small. So let's make some modifications here. We'll pull this out and we'll move this over like so, and move this box to be larger. Let's do it again. And take out trash. Notice I do the same thing every time. That way I don't get different results because of some other process in place. So now let's read a book and let's build a sand castle. Okay, there's our 3 to-dos. They're numbered 1, 2, 3 in order. If I were to double click this one, nothing happens. Okay, and so that's one bug. Then if I hit edit, read a book is on the list, read a large book, and I hit edit, nothing happens, but it's gone back to my edit. Now if I edit again, it's there, it just hasn't updated the display. So let's just hit edit again, and let's double click build a sandcastle and then add build a snowman. Just see if it's a refresh item, and notice it is. Notice now with a refresh, it says both of these are true. So it's capturing the data, but it's not actually displaying it because it's a property that's changed, not the entire item. Okay, so now let's go to read a large book and say, you know what, I actually don't want to do that at all. So let's delete that. And notice that we have 1, 3, 4, but I'm betting that it's actually 1, 2, 3 behind the scenes. So if I say test and hit add, yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, these have now been updated. Okay, so we have this refresh issue for this list that we need to figure out. So I think the issue or the solution here is to actually have this implement the I notify property changed. Because doing so, and add the using statement here, so doing so will allow us to, let's implement this, that'll allow us to make sure that we are notifying the caller that yes, something has changed in this object. And that's what binding list will listen for. So we need to, let's create a method down here. So private void notify property changed. And we're going to pass in here a caller member name. And then we'll call it string property name. And set default to empty string. So control dot there to add the using system.runtime.compiler service. So that's going to figure out who's calling this. And then from there we can just say if property changed is not equal to null, meaning someone's listening to this event. So if someone's listening to this event, then do a property changed, passing in this as the sender, and new property change event args with the property name. So it's saying, hey, something's changed, and here's the name of the property that's changed as the argument, and the caller is this object itself. Okay, so with that being said, now we need to modify our properties here. So we need to change these to full properties. I don't believe, oh, we do, awesome. Look at that. So I just click on it and say, give me a full property for that, and it does. And I'll do the same thing for to do text, convert to a full property. So control dot to add that, and then we'll do the same thing for position number. So now I have 3 different selections here. I have my position number, to do text, and is complete. Let's put a line break here to kind of separate these out. And they use lambda expressions for the full properties. We can do that. We just need to make sure that any of our changes get wrapped inside curly braces because of the fact we're doing 2 things on this line. So let's wrap this here, and then let's put a curly brace at the end so we have it. There we go. So set, and let's format this There we go. Control ED formats it nicely for me with a set like so. And now in here, after I set the value, then I can do the notify property changed method and not have to pass anything in because it's going to figure out the calling member name and just insert that. That makes my pattern a little cleaner. So let's do this. Let's break this out in a different line. Let's add our curly brace and add another curly brace at the end. And then we'll do the ED to kind of format more nicely. And then we need to paste this at the end. Notify a property change. Do the exact same thing here. So we'll wrap this in a curly brace, add a curly brace, whoops. At the end, don't wipe out that semicolon though. And let's do this where we paste in afterwards that notify property change, do the control ED to make it look pretty because that was horribly ugly. And now our formatter has made it better. We gotta add the set to the next line. So now we have 3 notifications of property change, one on position, one to do text, and one is complete. The binding list should be able to pick up those changes, but let's test that theory. So take out trash, build a snowman, watch Frozen. Okay, and we can double click and change to true. We can edit this. Snow person. And notice the update and edit here. Click it again. Now it says build a snow person, but it's not complete yet. Let's double click that to be true. And we're done. So now we have the ability to see all these values. They're numbered in correct order. If we were to delete one, let's say take out trash, gets deleted. Now we have an updated order for our to-dos. However, we still need to do the bonus challenge, which is to use the arrow keys to move an item up or down in priority. Let's figure out how to do that. So, under our properties for our list box, let's set a event on key up. Actually, you know what? I don't want to do on key up. Let's wipe that. Oops. Man, click it too hard and it thinks it's double click. I want to wipe that out and do a key press instead. The reason why I'm going to do key press is because I can actually cancel that event or say we've handled it already. So let's set up a switch on e.key key code. Okay, key char instead, sorry. And then here let's do a case and say, let's do keys dot and say up. We'll have a break. And that's not going to work. It's saying, hey, that's a problem. Can't convert from keys to a char. I think that's the code, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you some live debugging while we do it. Let's put a breakpoint right here. I have just a default which does nothing. Let's run this. And we're going to add test 2. And I've now selected this one right here. I'm going to hit the up key. Nothing happens. So it's not triggering the to-do list like so. Now we're not going to actually do any work on this here. We're just going to set the is input key to be true to listen for these two events. Now, in their example, they do the key down event. Let's listen on the key press and see if it's still the case or not. So test, and if I were to press down right now or up, nothing, whoops, down or up, nothing happens to my breakpoint. So it looks like it does have to be the key down event. So let's go back to our to-do, select our to-do list, go to properties, which is events, and go to the key down method, and we'll do the same thing we're doing up above. Only here we'll say, I'm not going to copy and paste, I'm just going to do just like Microsoft did, a switch on e.keycode. And again, it creates that entire list. Let's scroll all the way up here and delete that list, like so. And instead of key code, we will say down, and we'll do some work, and then up, and we'll do some work as well. So let's just put a breakpoint for key down. We'll actually put a breakpoint right here as well, just to make sure that we even get to this. So we start this again. We say just some text. I'm going to select the text and hit down. Notice that the key code has been hit and it says down is our value. And so if we were to step into this, it gets to our breakpoint down here because it's gone into this down case statement. So now we have the code we need. We can wipe out this code, but don't just delete the method, because if you do so, you'll create a corruption in your form. You know what? I'm going to do it. Normally, you'd come over here, you'd select this, you'd go to your properties, and you would delete out your key press event, and then come back here, and if the code is still here, which is not half the time, half the time it deletes it out. If it's still here, then you can wipe the code out. But I'm going to do it this way instead. This is a pretty common mistake. Come over here, and you get this fun little error right there. Read the error messages. The error message says that it cannot find that event. So the to-do list box underscore key press. Designer cannot process unknown name. That's because we don't want that key press event. Delete that key press event. Save this. This is probably the one time I'll tell you to modify the designer.cs file. And now you come back over here and we're good to go. So now what we need a method to move something down and another one to move something up. So now we have this code right here which is working. This which is done, we've now just said listen for the down and up keys. By default, they're not listened to. And now we need to have some way of saying change position in this list. So let's create up here in our pattern we've been doing, which is that we take something that's existing and move it up or down, just like we do all the rest of the actions outside of the event. So private void move item. Now I could create two methods here. One that's move item up and another that's move item down. I think for simplicity's sake, I'm going to do that. Or we could create one method called move item and then just indicate which direction to go or what index to go to. I think that's a little too complex. So move item, and we're going to have the to-do item model to do. That's the currently selected to-do item. Now don't forget that's going to change where all the indexes are. So we have to use the index number to insert it. But what we want to do is we want to insert it at one above where it was at. We're going to use the position number to do so. And to do that, what we're going to do is say to do list dot insert. Actually, we're going to, I don't believe that insert will do a position. Oh, it will. Nice. That's right. Add is the one that doesn't use position. Index is the one, or insert is the one that uses the index. So the index, let's just say 1 for now and to do. So this 1 right here is what position do we want to insert that into? What's the index value? Well, the index is going to be a 0-based index. So if we were at position 2, and you want to go to position 1, well, we actually have to subtract 2 from that position number because we want to be at index 0, which is position 1. So therefore, we're going to say to do dot position number minus 2. That's the value of wherever we're at. So that's going to be move up, and then move down will be similar, just the opposite. So move item down is going to be if position number is, let's just say, greater than to do list dot count. So the count, let's say there's 3 items. The count will be 3. Well, we have positions 1, 2, and 3. So if the position number is actually equal to count, means the count's actually plus 1. So if it's equal to the count, that means that it's the top position. We can't move it down the list. Now, up and down might be a little bit confusing right now because of the fact that up seems like it would be, 1 becomes 2 becomes 3. But in reality, if we look at this list here, the physical up direction, meaning up this form as in, to the top, that it means a lower position number. So it seems a little backwards, but that's because of the number versus the position on display. So if we're going to move it down, that means we can't be at the last value because there's nothing to move it below. So we're going to move this, and instead what we're going to do is we're going to use the position number. And what that will do is it will move you down one a list. So let's talk this through. So if you are the 3rd item in the list out of 5, so you're the 3rd item, so you're position 3, but you're at index number 2. If you want to move 1 down the list, meaning be it at position number 4, you have to move to index number 3. Well, that was the position number, therefore we can reuse the position number. So now with these two, in theory, complete, as long as, whoops, we've got one more thing to do. I almost forgot. Reorder to-dos. Once you do all this, you need to change the numbers on everything. Otherwise, you're going to have 2 4s in the list or 2 2s or something of that nature. So position down is the move item down, and we need a to-do item. So to get the to-do item, let's take this code here. And actually, we're going to surround this. So if to-do list box dot selected item is not equal to null, then do this work. But first, we need to grab that to-do. So with that being done, now I can pass in that to-do. And we can copy this and paste it again and do up and move item up. In theory, that works. let's run this and make sure we test our theory. So let's do a full test. Take out trash, build a snowman, watch Frozen. And then we can say, you know what, actually watch Frozen comes before build a snowman, so therefore we push up once, and now watch Frozen is number 2. Push up once again, and now watch Frozen is our most important thing to do. And if we select take out trash, we can move that to the bottom because that's really just no fun. So there we go. So now we have our up and down arrows, which we can move things up and down our list, and it renumbers it and it reorders it, and life is good. Okay? So that is the completion of the bonus challenge as well. So the primary challenge was to set up this to-do list in the first place, to have the ability to add, to edit, to delete, and to complete items. And that complete is that double click. Then our bonus challenge was to have that arrow functionality. So selecting an item, we can move it up or down the priority list based upon that arrow movement. And that's complete as well. All right. So hopefully you kind of grasp that concept. This is a larger one kind of. Took a couple more things to learn, but that's why we're doing these to-do list challenges, because each different UI brings a different thing to the table. And by practicing these, we can get used to the more nuanced ways of using our user interface, not just the very basics of putting a button on a form. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.